Hello everyone, I hope all of you are doing well. So in this video, we will go over some of the properties in CSS that we can use in CSS while we're building our website. Now this is for week 4, lecture 2 that we did not get a chance to go over. So here, what I have is I've already created an index.html file and this is how it looks like in the browser. So basically what we're going to do is we'll create a styles file and then we'll look at um, some of the properties that we can use in the CSS while we're designing our HTML page. This is very basic, just for you to understand. We'll start with the difference between class and ID. But before that, let me create the CSS file. So I'll just go to File, or you can just click the new icon here and then save this file as CSS file. I'll name it styles. You can name it anything, just remember the name. So styles.css, and it's in the same folder where I have my index.html, and I'll save it. Okay, now I have a styles file or the CSS file, but the problem is my index file or my index document does not know of the styles file. So for that, what we will do is link it here. So we'll create a link using the link tag and the attribute rel for relation, which is style sheet, and href, in this case it will be styles.css. Make sure that you use the same name for the styles file as you've named your CSS file here. Okay, now there's a relationship between your HTML document and your CSS file. Now let's try to look at ID and classes. So for example, if I want to, let's say, give a color for this paragraph, okay, let me code it in a way that the paragraph becomes the text color for the paragraph is red. So I would write P in the styles file and then open the bracket, close it, and then use the color property with the value red. If I save this now and refresh, notice that all paragraph tags are red now in color. So this happens because we've specified that the P tag or the paragraph tag should have a color red. So wherever the index or any HTML document, wherever it finds a paragraph tag, it will just change the color to red. But what if I don't want all my paragraphs to be red in color? I want some of my paragraphs to be blue in color and some of them to be red in color. How do I do that? Now, for this, what we usually do is we create something called class. Okay, we create a class which is nothing but a general style. So all you do is you create a general style and then you're able to apply it wherever you want to apply it. Okay, it wouldn't, for example, if I create a style for a paragraph, or if I create a class for a paragraph, wherever I apply that class, the style or will take effect there only. It won't take effect for other paragraphs. Let's see how we can do that. It will make more sense to you then. So for example, the first paragraph I want it to be red in color, and the second paragraph I want it to be blue in color. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'll use the class attribute here and give it a name. You create a class, that means you create or you can give it a name as you wish. So in this case, let's say I want to call it red because I want this paragraph to be red in color. And then the second one, I'll call it blue. Okay, so I've used the class attribute I've given it a name. I've created a name for it. Now, notice this won't do anything. You've just created a class attribute, but you've not specified the styling for you've not specified the styling for that class. So how do we write the styling for classes? So the first thing you need to remember is whenever you write a class, you need to use a dot. So let's say I've written a class for red. So dot red, this is my first class, and then dot blue is the second class. Okay, so I have these classes. Now, if I want it to be, now let's save this and let's go back and see the class red and the class blue are for the P tags or the paragraph tags, right? So in this case, what you would do, if you only want this class to be applied to paragraphs, you will add the tag before it. Okay, so in this case, I'll say every paragraph that has the class, the dot, remember it specifies or it signifies class. Okay, so every paragraph that has class red, do this. So whatever would be in the brackets would be executed. Similarly, every paragraph that has blue, that has the class blue, do whatever you want to specify here. So let's say here I would write color red, and then here I would write color blue. Okay, and I would remove that so the the it doesn't take the basic styling. So if I save this and go back, notice this one is red and then this one is blue. Why? Because I've created the class red and blue for these paragraphs, and the styling here specifies that every paragraph that has a class red will have the color red, and every paragraph that has the class blue will have a color blue. So that's how you would create classes. For instance, you can even use font, let's say family, Arial. So the first one will have a different font, the second one will have a different font. So whatever you specify here, that will be applicable to the tag. Now, notice what happens. I've created this class red and blue, right? If I try to add, let's say, the class red to h1 tag, notice what happens. So this is, here is an ID, which is the h1 or heading 1 tag, and I've given it a class red. If we were in class right now, I would have done a quick poll to ask you all if this would turn red if I refresh the page, but let's see if it does. Okay, so if I refresh this, notice it didn't turn red. Why? Because we specified that this class should belong to a paragraph, right? But if I remove that condition that it should belong to a paragraph, if I remove the tag and then I save it, then this reads as every class that is named as red. Okay, so in this case, it will turn blue. Sorry, it will it will turn red. Why? Because now it's not limiting to that paragraph tag. Okay, so that's the difference. If you specify the paragraph tag, not just the paragraph tag, if you specify any tag, it will the styling will only be applied to that specific tag. But if you don't specify the tag, then wherever you use that class, no matter where it is, the styling will be applied. Okay, so so that's about the class. Now there is something called ID, and we looked at it earlier. So ID is equal to, let's call this heading. Okay, we saw this before when I think we did the linking of sections on the same page. That's when we created an ID. So ID basically is similar to a class, but the only difference is you can use class multiple times, just like how previously I used class red here and then here. You can use class multiple times, okay, because it's a general style. But the ID should be unique. So if I use ID here, meaning if I create a ID or if I create an ID with the name heading here, I cannot use the same name anywhere else. It's as simple as the concept of your own student ID. So your student ID only belongs to you. Nobody else can have that student ID, right? Because if two people had the same ID, it would be difficult to distinguish which person actually holds that ID, right? Similar to the situation with CPR or passport numbers, everyone has a unique number given to them. Similarly, IDs have to be unique. You cannot use the same ID name. So, for instance, I cannot create later on, let's say, H3 and give it an ID heading. Okay, I cannot do that. Even if it's H1, even if this was H1, I cannot give it another, I cannot give it an ID attribute with the same name, with the same ID name that I created beforehand. Okay, that's the only difference in terms of HTML. Okay, so let's say here I've created an ID heading. Now, how can I create a style for it in CSS? So like I mentioned before, for a class, you would use a dot. Okay, so class has a dot, but, and I think we know this from before, for an ID, we use hash. So hash heading, okay, and here you would write your CSS. So let's say I want, what can I write? Okay, let's say color is purple. Oh, we can use background. Okay, so background color is, let's say, purple. I don't have high hopes from this color match. Okay, so notice how the red color is gone because I removed the class for red. Here, the ID is taking the same uh, color, actually the same style from the ID heading in the styles file. Okay, now what if I said the ID has to be unique, right? So if I use it this way, let's say H2 ID is equal to heading testing IDs. Let's say if I'm doing this wrong thing, which is supposedly a crime, I have two IDs with the same name, which shouldn't be allowed, like I said. If I refresh this, do you think that the testing IDs would show a purple background for me here? Um, would it show the purple background or would it not show it? Because like I said, you cannot have two IDs with the same name, right? Again, if we if we were in class, I would have done a poll for that. But again, okay, let's see. If I refresh it, I can still see the purple color, but let's see what happens when we go to W3C. Yeah, valid. If I choose the file, if I choose this index.html file and check, see, again, we forgot the meta tag. So meta car set UTF-8, just write that. And Okay, so that would make this error go away, but the problem would be duplicate ID, and this is an error. It's telling you on line 13, which is here, you have created an ID, actually not line 13. If we remove this, yeah, line 13, um, again, sorry, my bad. Let me show it to you again so it's not confusing. I go back and check. Yeah. So it's telling me now that I have on line 14, I have a duplicate ID, which is wrong. And it's also giving me a warning that the first occurrence of it was on line 13. So whichever one is wrong, you should remove it. It's trying to tell you that. So don't have two IDs. It's going to be wrong. Again, in the browser, it doesn't tell you anything, but these are the kind of things you should remember when you're coding. So, okay, let's remove this. Okay, now we know the difference between ID and class. What happens? Okay, let me create another class using some other new CSS property. Okay, I want to create a class, so for that I need to put a dot. I can specify the tag before it, but for now I won't specify it because I want to keep it open to being used by all the tags in HTML. So I would just write dot for the class. I'll name it large, and then for this I want it to be now. Okay, 1 second. Should I start with this? Okay, let's start. So in this case, we have, for example, I want to increase the size of the text. So there's a property for this called font size. Okay, and there are three ways of specifying font size. But the first way, I'll show you the first way now. It is using percentages. So for example, I can write 300%. Okay, and now I'll show you how that works, but before that we need to use this class somewhere so we can see it in the browser, right? So for that, let's say, again, we have ID here, we have two classes here. What if I want to add the large class here, but I also want to keep it as red? Okay, so I also want to use the class red, but I again also want to use the class large. So for that, how to use multiple classes, it's that you would uh, write the first class, okay, put a space, and then write the name of the second class. So in this case, large, and then red was the first class. So if I save this and then refresh, notice how it changes. Now the text is a bit large. Now, if we go back to font size, 100% would mean normal, the normal font. It's similar to this, right? If we use this, if I take you to 100%, notice how it was, sorry, if I make it 300%, notice how large it became, similar to how it was before. That's exactly what's happening. So 100% means the normal or the default setting for the user. So this is kind of like a relative size. It's not a specified size, but it increases the size for the user. So if the user was already, let's say, at 300, okay, and I change this to 300, let's see if it will make any difference. Yeah, it will, because now it's multiplying 300 to what was the setting for the user. Okay, so it's a relative size. Now, that's one way of writing font size. If we go back to 100% and refresh this, okay, so this is the percentage. Okay, now there's another way of specifying the exact size. Let's say I want it to be exactly 50 pixels. So the next way, the first way was percentage. The second way is using pixels. And pixels is like exact measurement of how big it should be. So if I refresh this is, did I save this? Okay, 50 pixel is that big. I did not expect it to be that big. If I make it, let's say 5 pixels, yep, it's too small now. So it's exactly the same size. Let's make it 25 pixels. Yeah. So you can change the size based on, whatever value you want it to be. Now, generally, the pixel values come from the designer. The designer will tell you what value to use. You do not generally have to find out how much should be the pixels, but yeah, it's generally, whatever looks good, you pick that value for it. So this would be a good um, size for probably headings. So yeah, it's up to you how you want to display it. Okay, so we've looked at percentages, we've looked at pixels. Now there is another way of writing it, another way of specifying the font size. It is called EMS. Okay, so let's change this to 1 EM. It's called EMS, but right now it's EM. And EM is probably, I'm not sure what it is. Let's check. EM, full form CSS, simply, I don't know what's the full, uh, I'm not sure what's the full form. Okay, nobody tells us what's the full form here. I'm not sure. I'll try to find it out and let you all know, but it's usually called EM. So what is EM? EM again is the relative way of defining size. So if I write 1 EM, just like 100%, it's the actual user setting. Okay. But if I change it to 10 EM, it will multiply 10 to the actual user setting. So if I refresh this now, notice how big this is. Again, if I change this to 0.5, it will decrease it. So below 1 is decreasing, above 1 is increasing. And it's increasing what? The settings of the user. So if the setting of the user currently was, let's say, again, 400, and I change this to 10, no, yeah, notice how big it is now. Okay, so it's again user's default setting of the page. And based on that, you're displaying or you're manipulating the size for the user. Okay, so those are the three ways. You can either write it as this way, or let's say 100 percentage, and there's another way which we looked at, which is pixel. So these are the three ways: EM, percentage, and pixels. Okay, for now, let's keep it as um, 1 EM, or even 2 EM is fine. 2 EM. Yeah. Okay. So that is classes and ID along with sizing, how to display the different size. Now let's look at something called the CSS Box Model. Okay. Now, how do I show this to you? Okay. We already have this here, right? Which is basically an ID. It has here is an ID. Let's make the color white so it looks a bit better. Um, okay, if I refresh this after saving it, it becomes white. And now I also wanted to have a border. Okay, so for border, I would specify what should be the size of the border, which is 1px. Remember the sizing we just looked at? You can even change those to use other units. So 1px, it should be solid, or you can even use, I think, something called dotted. Not sure if it will work, but no harm in trying. And then what color do you want it to be? I want it to be black. Okay. And the semicolon, save that. Oh, 1px is not going to show up definitely. So let's change it to 10px. It is there, but it's very thin. So 10px, yes, it's dotted. So you can either write it as dotted, either make it as solid. This is playing around with it, figuring out how to basically, you know, style your content. Okay, so right now we have here is an ID, which is basically text, right? And in HTML terms, it's considered as content. So your content, like we said before, can be anything. It can be an image, a video, a text, anything, right? So the CSS box model specifies that there are actually four things, okay, in that box model. There is the content, which can be the text. In this case, it is text. It can be text, video, image, whatever. Then you have a border that surrounds that um, content. So for all these other things also, you can set borders. So if I can just copy this, paste it here, there will be a border. So all these contents can have borders. Okay. So we have a border, we have content. Those are the two things. I said there are four things, right? So the remaining two are the spacing between that content and the border. Okay. Now let's look at how that is represented. If I write padding here and let's use 20px or 20 pixels, and right now it looks something like this, the heading, right? But if I refresh, notice now between the border and the content, there is some spacing around it, right? That's called padding. So padding is the spacing that is between the border and the content. Okay. Now, if you add, let's say, margin and 100 pixels, notice what happens. Okay, so the padding is still there between the border and the content, but outside that border, there is a lot of spacing now. That's called margin. So the four things are margin, border, padding, and then what's this one? Content. Let me draw it for you here if I can. For some reason, this thing is not working now. I want it to be on the same page. Let's see, maybe it's not going to work. Anyway, let me open it in the new tab. So if, let's say, this is the border, okay, and then there is some text that's written. The spacing between the text and the content will be padding. So this is padding. I'll just denote it by P. Okay. And the spacing that's outside the border, which is here, everywhere here, 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 here. So the green one is the border. Okay. Here is margin. So this is margin. Okay. If we can even take a look at it here, if I inspect this, if I click on this, wait, here, yes, should be here. Yes, see? So this is the box model. This is how it looks. This is your content. Notice how it's getting highlighted here, right? So if I highlight here, this is the content. This is the padding. Notice it's telling you that your element or your tag has 20 px of padding, and then there is a border which is of 10 px, and then you have a margin which is of 100 px. This is the box model altogether. So you have content, padding, border, margin. Okay, now I hope that's clear. Um, Now one more thing. You can have, if I can go back, close this. You can even write it this way. Now notice what happens. If I refresh this, let me close this, refresh. Now the margin or the space outside the border is only at the left. That's because I've only mentioned for the left. So when you write margin, it means put the spacing on all the four sides. But if you specify the side, then the spacing will be only at that side. So for example, the padding here is everywhere. Even I can make this, I think, to 50, so it's more clear. Yeah. So the spacing, the spacing between the border and the content is on all the sides, right? But the margin is only on the left side. That's again because why we that's because we specified left. Okay. Now what happens if I write margin before this and give it a value of 200 px? Notice what happens. So this is still 100, okay, but this is more, which is 200, this is 200, this is 200. So if you write so this basically overrides the left margin that is specified here. The top, the right, and the bottom are still 200 pixels, right? But because of this, the left one is changed to 100. So what this means is you can override multiple side declarations this way. So if you want all the sides to be, if you want the remaining sides to be of a certain spacing and one side to be a certain spacing, you can write it this way instead of writing it all out, like writing left, a margin left, margin top, margin bottom, margin right. Instead of writing all of that, you can just mention margin for all of them and then change the one that's different. Similarly for padding, I can write padding right, or let's use bottom, is 5 pixels. Okay, notice how it changes. So that's the difference. Okay, now that's about spacing. What if, my next question is, what if I want to, let's say, okay, before that, usually all web pages, not web pages, sorry, all browsers have their own margins. Margins are these spacings, right? The one that we spoke about. Usually, this blank area, the body, usually has its own margins. Okay, so and they're different on different browsers. So for Chrome, there will be different margin and padding. For Edge, it will be different. For what other browser is there, it will be different for that as well. Okay, so in that case, what we can do is we can set global declarations or global style. How do we create global style? Now, I want you to remember something from your previous labs. In your previous labs, you were told that your body or your web page basically should follow one font type or one font family. And we were doing this usually, right? We would go to the body tag and just write style, font, family, and then Arial, right? That would mean that, okay, there's Azan going on. Let's take a break and then I'll be back. Okay, so this is what we were writing before. We were specifying that the body or the all the text that is there on the web page should follow the same font, and we were specifying the font here. Now, for this, for now, like because now we know CSS, right? We know that we can move all our style in the styles.css file. So what we can do is copy this part, just the font family area, copy that part and remove the style tag from here. Okay, go back and create the style here. Okay, so I would just write font family here. Now this would mean that I can get rid of this as well. And now all the text on the website or the web page will be in Arial. Now I was talking about the margin that come with all the browsers, right? How to get rid of those? You can just write margin 0 and padding 0. So it gets rid of all the spacing, because usually those spacing, on the different browsers, they make your website look or appear different on different browsers. So in order to get rid of that, you can just specify this in the body tag and there will be no spacing. Now watch very carefully. You will notice that there's a little bit of spacing here and then at the top, which is not really visible, but in this case, on the left side, there is a bit of spacing. So if I save this and run it again, sorry, refresh it again here, the thing when you teach so many programming stuff. So, okay, you refresh this and notice how the spacing is gone now. Yeah. So that is what happens when you, this is like the basic, uh, clearing of all the spacing. So your website kind of looks similar on all the browsers. So that's a globe. So anything that you add in the body tag or the HTML tag, or there are some other tags as well, they're considered as global style because they will be applied to the whole web page. Okay. Now, there are some, what can I say, some properties that are there. Now, again, these kind of properties, trust me, you will learn better if you practice on your own and try to learn about the new properties in CSS. W3 Schools is the best resource you can use for this. But then again, I'll go through each of them to let you know what each of them can do. But there is no hard or fast rule that you have to follow these or you have to use these. It's up to you wherever you feel the need for using it. That's where you would generally use it. Okay. So the first one is color. We looked at color. Color is basically the text color. There's another thing that's called text decoration. Decor. Okay, why is it not showing? Wait. Text decoration. Okay. Now this one is basically to decorate your text. So that means you can make your text underline. So notice there's an underline now. Or you can even have an overline if you want fancy stuff. Yeah. So that's overline. There are many other things. Again, the best thing would be, once you learn something, you can just write text decoration CSS, and this is again a very good resource. They have a lot of good stuff, but it's here and there. Okay, just go to W3 Schools and notice how many examples they have. You can even test and see them, how they look. Oh, I did not know this. You can combine two things. It will, in this case, it will look like a sandwich. I think so. Cool. That's cool. So you can have underline, overline, line through. That's a good one. Okay, what else is there? Overline. Okay. Um, and they even tell you what properties are available for you to use. So that's again something really good. It tells you which browser it works with. So this is a really good way of testing it out. Uh, Wavy blue. I want to try that. Let's see. Wavy. Will it make the line wavy? Oh, that's nice. That's nice. What if I change it to dotted? Oh, dotted would be the same. Yeah, so that's nice. Wavy or dotted, you can even specify the color, I think. So maybe if I want it to be, what color should I choose? Yellow. Okay. Okay, you can barely see it, but it does the work. Okay. So that's great. I like that. So that's how you learn, right? I just taught you underline and overline, but if you just go to this resource, notice how many things I just learned. I just tried them out. So that's how you will learn. Trust me, that's the best way you will learn how to code is to when you learn something new, go and find something more about it. And then you will come across more and more things. It will become exciting for you to test things out. So that's text decoration. There's something called text transform, and this is basically, notice what this happens or what this does. Yeah, so text transform basically transforms your text to a specific state or to a specific case. So again, if I go to text transform CSS, yeah, uppercase, lowercase, you can even capitalize. There are others as well. You can specify none as well. That's a good one. So if you do not want it to be either capitalized, uppercase, or lowercase, you can just say none. Okay. So that's another good, um, way of learning. So now text transform is done. We know about font family, which is just to specify the font. We spoke about font size. Now there is something called font style. Okay, and this usually, oops, is this way. So notice, didn't do anything. Did I save it? Font style. Okay, I wrote it correct. It's bold. Why is this bold? Oh, I made it bold. That's why. Maybe bolder. Didn't work. Wait, let me see. Red. Oh, is it because of this? No. Bolder. Wait. Let's go to the magician W3 schools. Oh, I don't want to search it from here. Where is F? Font family, font size. Oh, yeah, font size. Oh, my bad. I in my head I was thinking about font weight. Okay, font style. Wait, font style. Wait, I'm confused for a minute. Ah, okay, this was font style. I think I did not speak about this with the other class. Okay, font style is this. Okay, font weight is basically to make it bold. Font style is to style it. And I think bold is not considered a style. So the styles that are, I don't know what's this one. Let's see if I save this. I think it's the same, like italics, italics. I still don't know how to pronounce that. Okay, so Yeah, that's font style basically. It's to, if I can show it to you here, this is oblique, which is very similar to this one, and the normal is without any style. So that's your font style. There's something called font weight. That's the bolder one, the bold one, not the bolder one, the bold one. So now it's bold. Okay, you can even use bold or bolder. I think font weight should be after this. Variant weight. Yeah, it's normal, bold, and there is something called 900. I don't know why that, I don't know how that would make sense. Oh, that's a lot more bold. Okay, so again, try and test it out with other things as well. Just like here, there are many others that we didn't really go through. But then, if you go through them, you'll know more and then you'll become a professional. Okay, so the last three things that I want to really show you are something called line, first of all, line height. And like the name mentions, or like the property mentions or specifies, it's basically the line height. And again, anything that has to do with size, you can use percentages, pixels, and EMS. Okay. So in this case, let's make it 1.5. No, 1.5, you won't be able to see it. Let's make it 3 EM. Okay. So right now it looks like this, but if I refresh, so there's the line height has changed, right? And if you keep adding text, for example, I just copy this. Notice this is the line. So the line height is kind of long, right? Or you can even make it small. So let's make it 0.5, and that looks ridiculous, but you get the point, right? So 0.5 is the line height. Now let's say I want to use letter spacing. Now this is, again, the spacing between the letters. So if I make it 3 EM, notice what happens. There is that much space between each of the letters. But if I make it 0.5, try and test. Oh, it's still, there is a lot of space still. Anyway, so 0.5, if I make it 0.2, let's see. Okay, so that's how you can, you can even write it this way. So 2 pixels, and it will look something like this. And the last one is word spacing. And as the name specifies, it's the spacing between the words. So if I make it 10 EM, it will be huge. But if I change it to 0.1 EM, you won't be able to, oh, you will be able to read. That's good. So that's the spacing between the words. And yeah, that's basically it. So now let's look at, one second. So basically in lab 2, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to add a link to the linked to styles.css in the history.html file. History.html file, you'll find it in the same folder that you downloaded for the first lab. Now in that file, um, in both index file and the history file, you're supposed to add the class first in the first paragraph in that file, add class second in the second paragraph, and class third in the third paragraph. And then for the list, you need to define an ID called links. Remember, the ID links should be for the list and not the list items. Okay. And then add to styles.css the Then add to styles.css to implement. Okay, and then in the styles.css, you need to add all of this. So the first class should have this color, the second class should have this background color, third should have this background color, and links should basically have this background color. Okay, and then here, this is how it should look at the end. If you go to history.html, and what you need to do here is go back to the previous lab from unit 1 and add an external CSS to that lab. That means create a CSS file, add all the styles that you used within HTML as inline style, change it or move it to styles.css, and then link your style.css to all the web pages that you created for that lab. Okay, so that's lab 2. One thing that I forgot to mention is colors. Okay, so colors basically are represented in hexadecimal format. So there's a hash, and then there are 6 digits that you have. They can be character, they can be number. F is considered the highest digit or the highest value, and 0 is considered the lowest. So if you write hash F F F F F F F 6 Fs, then that means it's white color, and black is basically all zeros. There is an excellent website that one of the students told me about, if I can remember this. Yes, this is an excellent website to find colors. Um, I liked it, and I think it's something that you can even use for your project. So you can use Start Generator and basically just generate the colors. So let's say you like, I don't like any of these. So I'll just press space. It changes colors. Again, press space. I don't like any of them. Not yet. Not yet. Oh, I like orange. Okay, so if I like this color, I'll lock it. And if let's say I like this one as well, I will lock it. And then I will change the remaining. So this was a very good way of really creating this scheme, a color theme for your website. And I think it will be very useful. And if you want to copy, this is the color basically. So if you want to copy this color, you can just click on it and it copies the color for you, I think, because it said it copied the color. Okay, so if I try to go back and add that color, I can use, oops, it didn't copy it. So I think I have to copy it from here. If I go back, instead of red, see, you need to add the hash. So hash and then 6 digits, save that, go back. Now it looks a bit okay, but I can't really see it. So anyways, so that's a good way of finding colors. Basically, you need to find colors and then get them in this format. So hash and then these colors. You can also use this website, which is here. Use whatever you want to make your website look pretty. And that's about the colors. One more thing that I want to discuss is lab 3. So in lab 3, you're supposed to add link for the styles file to your layout.html. Again, it's in the same folder, the Suez Canal folder, I think. And in the HTML for layout, you need to, again, for the first paragraph, provide a class first. For the second paragraph, provide a class second. And for the third paragraph, provide a class third. For the list of links, not the list items, for the list of links, you need to provide an ID links, and then in your styles.css, you need to add this code. So for the body tag, add all of this. You do not need to create different body tags. You just have to add body selector once, and then just add all the values. So just like here, if I can show it to you again, I have the body selector and then all my CSS code. Okay, so that is how you would do lab 3. So before next class, try to work on lab 2 and lab 3. We will discuss it in the next class, probably on Sunday or Monday. And um, after that, we'll move on to lab 4 and 5. Okay, so I think that's it from my end. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. I know this is a lot and very new, but trust me, if you try the trick that I told you, as soon as you learn something, go and try to find something more about it. It creates motivation, it creates enthusiasm, and you definitely learn more and better than what you're taught in the class. Okay, so I think that's it. And yeah, have a good day, have a great weekend, and see you all next week. And thank you for watching.